All right. As I said Monday, we're developing and looking at this, and really, the person, our next guest is the person I have to thank for this thought of mine. Bob McCoskrie from Family First edited together a group of clips of left-wing people saying imported culture wars in response to the fact that they seem to be going backwards in their push to get kids to change their genders and genetically mutilate themselves or get castrated, and all the DEI stuff that has been pushed back by this government, the end of woke and Winston Peters' war on woke. And the catch cry, as Bob properly identified, is imported culture wars. Well, if anyone, I guess, could be accused of importing a culture war, rightly or wrongly, it would be Bob McCoskrie from Family First, and he joins us by video link now. Bob, how are you?
Good morning, Sean. Good to be with you.
All right. Look, it would be fair to say, I think, Bob, that you are one of the frontline warriors if we're having a culture war in the culture war. Would you take that descriptor?
Well, I guess you might be able to take it as a compliment. I think my job description is basically speaking common sense into a culture that's lost its way. So if that's a culture war, so be it. But I just laugh at the whole importing aspect of it. I mean, what are we importing? Who's importing? And what is this culture war? And it only seems to be one side of the debate that's yelling this phrase.
All right. Are there aspects of the debate we're having about social issues, and I think that's a better, more neutral way to describe it, that are common around the world? Are there aspects of the things that you advocate for and your supporters have concern for that are also being raised as concerns in other countries?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's what I did when I did this review of the statement Importing Culture Wars. I had a look at some of the moral debates that have been going on in New Zealand and figured out, okay, who actually imported this first, if there was an importing? And so I looked at things like abortion, euthanasia, marijuana, Black Lives Matter, defunding the police, gay marriage. And guess what I found? I actually found that it was the liberal groups, the groups that were pushing changes to these laws that we were opposing, they were the ones importing the ideas. I mean, I don't know if you've seen my blog on it, but I found this classic photo of 1973 when Roe v. Wade was passed in the United States, which effectively legalized abortion in the United States. And then there's this photo of a protest in Queen Street, I think it is, a historical photo, black and white still, 1973, and there's, I think it's Helen Clark under the banner saying, we want reproductive rights, or whatever they called it, that masking word, in New Zealand as well. So we imported the culture war of Roe v. Wade. Of course, Black Lives Matter was a classic example of importing a culture war. I mean, we had people marching up Queen Street ignoring COVID regulations for George Floyd, someone who probably half of them didn't even know who he was or what the case was actually about. So that was an imported culture war as well. So look, Sean, the statement is simply, they keep yelling that we're importing the culture war. In fact, what we're doing is we're pushing back and saying, no, we don't want some of this overseas trend coming into New Zealand.
All right, but there are, on all sides of these many arguments and debates, there are international groups or trends that form. I went to the ARC conference. You went to the ARC conference in London, which was generally the centre to the centre right. We know that Socialist Youth International and all these other groups are coordinated. In the year 2025, is there anything wrong with being part of a global community and discussing social issues across national boundaries?
No, absolutely not. And I mean, imported culture war is being used as a stick to try and shut people down. It's a form of jamming, which is designed, it's the same as calling somebody far right or some form of bigot or some
Nazi,
form of
Nazi.
That's the label that's thrown to try and shut down the debate. That's what they're doing. They don't want to debate things like the gender ideology and whether dudes should be playing in women's sports. They just want to shut it down and say, oh, we don't want an imported culture war. In fact, it's interesting, Sean, I heard you just talking about Andrew Little. During the cannabis referendum, we actually formed a coalition of New Zealand groups, and we looked around the world to find out who had done the best research on this issue, that we could utilize their research and what they had found from areas in the world that had legalized cannabis for recreational use. We found this group called Smart Approaches to Marijuana, SAM. So we said, okay, let's just link up with them. Let's utilize their resources. Andrew Little immediately accused us of getting funding from them and importing American messaging and all this type of stuff. The problem for Andrew Little was that they'd already imported the war from the US, because the US were going down this legalizing cannabis argument. And we were simply responding and finding the best research. And the best place to find the research, as you said, Sean, is go to the countries that have already started down this track. So if we want to look at how bad euthanasia should get, we should look at Canada. If we want to look at the extreme abortion laws, yeah, for sure, we would look at the United States. Cannabis, we would look at Colorado, Oregon, Washington State, Canada, Portugal. I mean, that's what we do, Sean, isn't it? That's
what about the transgender issue and conversion?
Well, once again, I think the United States have been pushing that to the max, but also we've found out that in the UK, the Cass review exposed that the ideology was being pushed there, but it's also being pushed in Australia as well. And we know of medical professionals who have been suspended because they've spoken up and said, look, we don't want to prescribe puberty blockers to vulnerable kids who can't give informed consent. So we're looking, in my job, I'm looking at Australia, I'm looking at Canada, the UK, America, and in Europe for trends and experience. So I'm importing their knowledge to fight the cultural wars that the left are importing.
So you don't deny that there is a culture war, and this was the other thing that there was for ages. The kind of centre left or the left said there is no culture war, nothing to see here. Well, there clearly is, and they appear to be, not winning at the moment. So you don't deny there's a culture war, and I guess you're saying it occurs in New Zealand as in the rest of the world in an international and interconnected context on all sides.
That's why I was at ARC, because I wanted to hear the very best speakers speak coming from our perspective, the social conservative perspective. But look, I just think we've got to be realistic. There is a cultural war, especially going on in the West. You won't find this in a lot of Muslim countries. They're not arguing about whether they hold up to Muslim values or anything. It's only in Judeo-Christian countries that have been founded on those Judeo-Christian values that are trying to kick out those Christian values. I mean, Trevor Mallard can't even mention the name Jesus in Parliament. He's got to kick that out of the prayer. That's the kind of battle that's going on, and this form of critical theory, Marxism, intersectionality,
decolonisation,
racial divide. That's the battle that's going on. It's a battle of ideas.
Are you concerned that the Prime Minister and Chris Bishop seem more than happy to use the phrase imported culture wars?
Yeah, I was concerned about that. I mean, I knew that Luxon was using it to boot away the abortion issue, and he was feeling under the pump on that one and lost his spine on just admitting that he was fully pro-life and that he would fight for those values. But look, I found some other written examples that I think you've seen. Helen Clark saying that she wants DEI, she doesn't want an imported culture war that maybe challenges that whole aspect. Jan Tinetti, Labor's education spokesperson, she said that if you oppose the radical RSC, that you're importing a culture war. And I mean, I even saw Chloe from the Greens saying that if you oppose the treaty principle bill, that's part of some imported culture war. I'm not sure where we're importing it from. But once again, I would just remind the audience, Sean, is that when they throw out that statement, imported culture war, they've run out of arguments and they're just trying to shut you down by beating you with a negative label. Ignore them, laugh it off. And look, I was just, I punish myself sometimes and I actually watch the mainstream news, mainly for research. I wouldn't do it if I wasn't in this job. But I just sat there and I kept on hearing this phrase, imported culture war, always in a negative label. And it was always coming from the left. And so I did this.
Well, not always. I said Luxon and Bishop use it. Unless Luxon and Bishop are the right, are the left, they use it as well. You mentioned the news media. It also seems a narrative or a critique that has been amplified by legacy and mainstream media in New Zealand.
Yeah, there's been a number of commentary.